I don't know about you, we're going to talk again about Sabbath. Sabbath is one of those things where until someone sat me down and walked through Sabbath, when someone sat down and explained it, I was like, I never thought about Sabbath like that. Some of you may know a guy called John Ortberg. He was the teaching pastor at a big church in the US for a long time. And he rang up his kind of like spiritual director, the guy who was just kind of mentoring him in the faith. And this was when he'd been like leading massive churches for like 20 years. And he rang him up and he just said, I just want you to know I'm a bit stuck in my apprenticeship to Jesus. He says, I believe, I think it's amazing and it's wonderful, but I'm a bit stuck in my apprenticeship to Jesus. And the guy on the other end of the phone paused. It was Dallas Willard, if any of you know who that is, but he paused. And then he gave him this. He said, you need to ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. You need to ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life because hurry is the chief enemy of spiritual growth. And when I heard this conversation relayed, I was like, that is something I'd never thought of. I don't know what you're like. I grew up where hurry, busyness, doing stuff, always having something on was seen not as a bad thing. This was like a badge of honor. We tried to do stuff. And as I reflected more and more on Sabbath and on those comments, I was like, that is something I'd never come across before. If you have a Bible with you, I'd love you to turn to Matthew chapter 6. Matthew is at the start of what we call the New Testament. This is kind of the Jesus side of the Bible, if you will. And Matthew is the first book there that is this kind of biography of Jesus. And we're just going to unpack a little bit of this. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry, it's going to come up on the screen. We're going to read from verse 6, verse 22. It says this, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either will hate one and love the other, or will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about what you will wear, or about your body. Is life not more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to his life? Lord God, we know some of the bits of your story that is hard to get our head around. But we ask, would you come and meet with us? Whether we've known you for a long time or whether we're not sure we even do know you, or perhaps we're somewhere in between, wherever we are, Lord, would you come and meet with us? We ask, Lord, come now in Jesus' name. Amen. If you had a direct line to God, and he was like going to speak to you really powerfully, really loudly tonight, and he said this, that you would find peace, serenity, hope, and life beyond your wildest dreams. But you would never be able to own the house you want, the car you want, have the job you want, the bank balance, or the partner you want. Would you be happy? If God said you'll find life beyond your wildest dreams, but you won't find the car or the house or the partner or the bank balance, would you be happy? And would you accept it? Would you say, okay, God, I'm in for that. That sounds okay. By the way, I'm going to do a poll. It's okay. I'm not going to ask anyone. And here's the thing. Whatever decision you make on that question, which, by the way, is kind of the essence of the passage we just read. Whatever decision you make, there are definite tensions that come on both sides of that. Either you'll find yourself in tension against some very strong and very kind of human instincts, or you'll find yourself in tension because you're fighting against perhaps the grain of God. I want to talk just for a few minutes before we interview Monday tonight. Monday's groupies are in the house. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Sabbath and hustle. What does Sabbath have to do with hustle? You know, Sabbath, just to be clear at the top, Sabbath is not anti-work. Sabbath is not anti-money. And it's not even anti kind of progression or growth. It doesn't stop these things, but it does beg a question of these things. And it begs the question of these things to say, are they in the right place in your life? Or have they taken a place they don't deserve? Whenever I talk about Sabbath, which, by the way, above anything else I ever talk about in church, this is the least popular. So welcome, it's good to have you. Enjoy, make yourself at home. Literally, it doesn't matter. If I talk about like sexuality or money, or everyone's like, it's fine. Sabbath, oh my goodness, don't do that. You know, when I talk about Sabbath, people go, they say this, I hear what you're saying, but Chris, you don't know my life and you don't know the struggle. I just want to own that and say, do you know what? You're right. I don't. I really don't. I don't know your life, but I do know mine. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that. It's the one thing I've realized I'm good at is talking about myself. So if you don't mind, just to indulge me for a minute. I don't pretend to have grown up knowing some of the situations you guys have grown up. But my situation growing up was one where we definitely experienced hunger. Like, my mum and dad didn't always know if they were going to be able to put food on the table. And we definitely experienced cold, which is just a matter of fact. If you grew up in the UK, it's cold, even in the summer. And it's worse where Adrian's from than where I'm from, because it rains every day there. But I definitely experienced hunger, definitely experienced cold. And I definitely experienced wanting to escape what I'd grown up around. So the school that I went to was pretty rough. It's kind of school where if you want to leave being a drug dealer, that was seen as aspirational. And where people, like, getting beaten up was just part of it. And I ran away from home at 16 because my parents didn't want me to go to school anymore. Like, they didn't want me to go to university. My parents couldn't understand why I would. So just to give you a bit of context, my dad drove buses for a job, and my mum was a receptionist. And I remember trying to explain to my dad that I wanted to do kind of romantic literature at university. And you can just imagine the conversation. And I said, Dad, I really want to go to university. I want to do romantic literature. And he went, that's a thing? And I said, yeah, I want to go and study kind of like these romantic novelists from the kind of 19th century. And he was like, so you're going to go to school and you're going to read not just books, you're going to go and read old books. Just didn't get it. And so that was that. I kind of left home because I wanted to go to school. And I grew up in the shadows of kind of alcoholic grandparents. And the shadows were long over our house. So my grandparents on my dad's side have both been alcoholics, both been abusive towards my dad and his brother in different ways. I had parents who both had nervous breakdowns. My mum didn't leave the house for a year while we were growing up. She was scared of the world. My dad, even now, is probably scared of the world, and they couldn't work at various times. And I grew up, and the only thing I wanted to do, I wanted to be rich. I wanted to be really well. I never wanted to have to face the decisions my family had faced. And I thought, if I can somehow escape this, then things will be good. I didn't want to have to think about the things that my parents and my grandparents had to think about. I went away to university, and during my first year at university, I managed to come top of our entire university in drinking, and did a really good job of it. But here's the thing, I realized that in the pursuit of anything else, there's no forgiveness. And if you can't face yourself, you have to find a way to escape yourself. And so I did it by drinking. And many of us have these escape mechanisms. We binge watch stuff, or we eat too much, or it's through sex or drugs or dating or whatever. Many of us have this escape mechanism, largely because there's no forgiveness within ourselves for the things that we do, and lots of other things that go with that. But it's fascinating, these escape mechanisms. But in Jesus, there's forgiveness. There's forgiveness for who we are. And there's slack in the system to allow us to be who we really are. And the pursuit I found of money is brutal because the mental game doesn't allow you to forgive yourself. You can either only work harder or escape harder. And those are the kind of two realities that I found. I eventually graduated university. And the day that I found out my results, I found out that I'd been awarded the highest honours classification in our university. And out of the 5,000 graduates, there was only 2 people above me. And when I found out my results, I sat staring at this computer and I felt really empty. This wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I realized the thing that I was chasing was not what I thought it was. And I think this is the thing. My education and career, of course, is important. But by allowing it to be God, I put it in a place where it couldn't live up to the expectations that I had for it. And I'd allowed it to take a place that it wasn't allowed to have. Or put it another way, our culture has taught us to believe that the itch we feel will be satisfied by more, by earning, by doing, by getting. And it won't, and it doesn't. I was sat here in a sermon a few months ago, and it was one of the moments where I just saw literally 90% of the room took a massive gulp of air. And it was the moment where Adrian was talking a bit about his life, and he talked about that God is as likely to promote you as to demote you. And people went, Like, sorry, we're not in for that. Like, half the church just walked out. And it was something where we've so tied what we're doing to our understanding of God. And you guys know my heart, that God cares about how we work and the work of our hands. But that doesn't mean we can worship Him. And I've found, and this has been my personal journey, but I've found the biggest counterweight to all of the tension around who I am and what I do and the things I give my life to, the biggest counterweight of all of that is to practice Sabbath. It's to take, for me, this is to take a 24-hour period every week. And I put in some things in place that some of you guys are going to find weird. But like, I turn off my phone when I can for like 24 hours. And I don't see lots of people because they just drive me crazy. And I read, and I curl up, and I play sport, and I do the things I enjoy, and I listen to worship music and whatever. I listen to non-worship music as well. But I found that this is the biggest counterweight. Otherwise, the stuff of this life consumes me. So just to kind of unpack some of these things that we see in here, and I think it's fascinating when God's talking about you can't serve both God and money, that He follows this by, therefore I tell you, don't worry. Don't worry. So some of the misconceptions of Sabbath, and then some helpful ways that we can do Sabbath, and then we're going to hear the wisdom and genius of Monday, okay? I don't want to build you up too much, but just enjoy it, okay? Firstly this, Sabbath is not a Western idea born out of people who don't worry about poverty. This is a biblical idea offered to the poorest people in the world at the time. And more than that, it's a God idea. A God who is able to say to the poor and the vulnerable who He loved, do not worry. Don't think that the Sermon on the Mount was given to these people who like just chilling out in their kind of near ancient world Mercedes or whatever. This is a people who had nothing, and he says, do not worry. Secondly, this misconception: Sabbath is not law, but it is good wisdom. There's no law against having 30 cups of coffee before 9 in the morning, but I wouldn't suggest it, and I'm addicted to coffee. It's just good wisdom. Sabbath is good wisdom. God is not saying you have to do this, but he's saying, I know how you're designed. You should do this. And they say this: Sabbath is not us bending our body and personality into a certain shape. It's releasing our body into the shape it's meant to be. We're so contorted by the things that we do in the pressures of our world that we've kind of lost what shape we're meant to be. And Sabbath is this way of kind of just like stretching out, going back to how we're meant to be. We are made for this, but we live in such confused times that it feels really unnatural. We're like, why am I stopping? I give you a vision, like on Sabbath Sundays, I drop my kids at school, and then I go back to bed for like an hour. And then I get up and I just kind of do some writing or something. And then sometimes I go back to bed again. It's brilliant. My wife comes home and she's like, how was your day? I was like, amazing. I slept. And finally this: Sabbath is not something to pursue once we get our lives sorted. It's the way to get our life sorted, because it puts ourselves before Jesus in an incredible way. Sabbath is not something to pursue once we get our life sorted. Once I earn this much, once I get my job under control, once I've done whatever, then I'll have time to Sabbath. And Sabbath is not about ticking a box. It's about choosing what we'll worship. The reality of it is we all worship something. Our only choice is what we choose to worship. So what does God say it is? Well, God says it's a day to rest. Not necessarily to sleep, although I do enjoy that. It's a day to rest. And this is engaging ourselves in a different way. So rest is the opposite of of work is sleep. It's not rest. Rest is something different. Rest can involve different types of things, different vocational things, different things that we enjoy and give us life and energy. Like playing sport is definitely for me part of my Sabbath. Learning to do skills and stuff like we said a couple of weeks ago is part of Sabbath. So it's a day to rest. It's a day to reorder our worship. You cannot spend every moment of every day thinking about the work you do and the money you're going to earn and the things you're going to get and say, but I worship God. It's like watching me eat everything that's in front of me and then saying, by the way, I'm on a diet. No, you're not. I can tell you're not on a diet. You're not meant to laugh at that. Just, by the way. Sabbath chooses what you let be the eyes of your body. When we read in this passage that eye is the lamp of the body, what are we fixated on? What are we turning our eyes to? Next to this, Sabbath is our way of saying we trust God more with our work and our things than we trust ourselves. I said it a couple of weeks ago. I had a complete breakdown about 6 or 7 years ago. My wife came into our house, and I remember Wilbur. He was like 9 months old. 10 months old. He could just walk. I sat in our kitchen just weeping on the floor. Just couldn't. I said, Abby, I just can't cope. I can't do anymore. And I realized in that moment that I was not taking care of myself. And someone says, I look at what you do, and my only conclusion is that you trust yourself more with your work than you trust God with it. And you work for a church. You don't trust God with the church. I wonder, do we trust God enough with our work? We trust the God who created the heavens and the earth to say, God, if you think this is okay, I'm going to put it down. I'm going to trust you with it. This is our active sign that we will not worry. And then finally this, Sabbath is the divine antidote to the toxic culture of being busy. It's our way of saying we are not going to pretend we serve two masters. You know, the difference between serving God or serving money and work and other things is that God is too gentle and loving to push the other things out of the way. Work and money, however, will consume us. They will eat us up and they'll throw us out the other side. And this subtle struggle to not check emails, or if I just do a little bit, then it'll just kind of get me ahead, or to be engaged in something that just distracts us. And we've made this busyness a badge of honor, but at the same time it cuts us off from God. And it's not just busy with work, it's busy with Netflix, or busy responding to messages and checking social media or whatever it is. Ronald Rolheiser, brilliant theologian, said this: it's not that we have anything against God, depth and spirit. We would like these. It's just that we are habitually too preoccupied to have any of these show up on our radars. We are more busy than bad, more distracted than non-spiritual, and more interested in the movie theatre, the sports stadium, the shopping mall, and the fantasy life they produce than we are in the things of Jesus. Pathological busyness, distraction, and restlessness are major blocks within our spiritual lives today. And that's kind of where I found myself often. And like we said a couple of weeks ago, this is us teaching out of weakness rather than strength. Guys, will you make yourself comfy, grab a coffee, and I'm just going to get Wendy up here, and then we're just going to talk a little bit about Sabbath as we move forward. So guys, say hi to someone and grab a coffee.
Oh,
Wendy,
guys,
come join us. So Wendy and I have been talking about Sabbath for a little while, and I'm just so excited to hear kind of a bit, like, you guys share a bit of your journey with these guys. How skeptical were you about Sabbath when people first started talking to you about it?
The first time I actually had it was from someone, and I'd been just venting how tired I was and how frustrated and how I wasn't sleeping well or even eating. And they were like, yeah, how about you try Sabbath? And I'm like, what is that? Like, yeah, I've heard of the word Sabbath, but what is that? That's what I do on a Sunday, right?
Because we have this idea that, like we were saying, we have this idea that Sabbath is, I turn to church, I serve all day, I'm utterly exhausted, I hate the church, and I go home and go, yeah, I Sabbathed.
Yeah. So that was it for me. And they were like, no. And in the following week, they just started sending me messages on Sabbath, books that I could read on it, like sending me podcasts that I could listen to. And I started doing it, listening to them, to the different things they were sending me. But still, I was like, yeah, I have no time for this. So I still didn't do anything about it until towards November, where I was totally and completely burnt out. And they were like, you could start with 4 hours. They were really determined to get me to do Sabbath. And they were like, you could do a few hours. And so one of the Saturdays, I was like, okay, 4 hours, here we go.
And what do those 4 hours look like? What did you do for 4 hours?
I switched off my phone, not really. Yeah, but it was somewhere like in another room. But after every 20 minutes, I would rush to go and check whether someone called.
Most people feel like this button here is for when it goes glitchy. They're like, it's an off button? I didn't know that.
You just have to long press and swipe, right? Yeah, and that first Saturday, the 4 hours were the longest hours of my life, because I was like, it's not yet. I kept checking, and I'm like, when will the 4 hours come to an end? So it wasn't really Sabbath. It was just 4 hours of waiting for the 4 hours to pass. Yeah.
And I think we have this idea, like I certainly did when I started Sabbath, going, oh my gosh, do I have to sit and like look at my Bible for like 24 hours? Like, I don't think I can do that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound restful.
Yeah. And then in the following weeks, I actually started being more intentional about it. I actually would switch off my phone. And then for 4 hours, I'll just be in a space. So I do this thing that I'm going to come out today where I dance. Like I throw serious dance parties in my house, just my cat and I. Yeah, we do that.
You realize this is going out to like 30 million people, just so you know.
Oh, I think I'm so comfortable with it right now. A few months ago, I wouldn't have said that. But then I would put on worship music, and if I'm too tired, put on some dance music. That's what I would do. I would read a Psalms, which for me I find very calming and very, you know, get me into that space. I would do some quiet time, and by the end of 4 hours in that, towards December, I was like, wow, I actually want more time. And so coming into the new year, I decided that I was going to be more intentional about Sabbathing and not just 4 hours now. Because I was like, I have school, I have work, I have this, I have that, I have friends to see. Karen invites me for food all the time. When am I going to do that? You know? But I decided I'm going to do sundown to sundown. So the first time I did it, I started at 8 p.m. because I wanted to go out and be with some friends and then come back. And then when we went back to work, I realized actually I can start from sundown to sundown. So now I do 6 p.m. on Friday evening into 6 p.m. Saturday evening.
And what would you say are the couple of things that you've noticed most different about you having done Sabbath?
I don't know what the people around me will say, but I tend to feel maybe I'm a little bit more loving. I'm more patient with people because what
Karen,
happens...
are you laughing? Seriously, guys, you're meant to be
Karen,
supporting
come on.
people here.
Yeah, but honestly, I am more present for people. I feel like I'm more connected even with what's happening around me because now I like what you said. If you work well during the week, then you're going to Sabbath well. So I'm more intentional to even not procrastinate on things that I should probably be done with. So I plan my week better in knowing that I'm coming into Sabbath. Because one of the podcasts I was listening to talked about how many of us will actually go home when you have had a long, long day, find your spouse or your friend or your housemate or even your cat and be like, oh, I'm so tired, but I'm going to love you so much right now. You know, it's really hard to love when we're very tired, when we're always busy. And for me, that was my song last year. You'll meet me up here running up and down, and I'm like, oh, so how was your week? Oh, good, but I'm really tired or I was busy, so I'm not present and I'm not there for people. So I'm finding myself more calm and relaxed and being able to see people more, you know. Yeah.
Do you know, I think I think it's so good. I think one of the things I'd wrongly thought for a long time was that because I have a lot to do, stopping is not going to be an answer to that.
Yeah.
But actually it works in a weird way, doesn't it?
That's
And I
true.
found myself way more attentive to work and way better at doing things.
Yeah.
What, other than, I mean, you talked about switching off your phone, what are kind of
Yeah.
like 2 or 3 things that you would say, this just was such a game changer for me to do this?
Yeah. Apart from that, so I was having a conversation with you last week and I shared with you how there's this one thing I hadn't done one of the days and it was bugging me one of the Sabbaths. And I was like, I need for the Sabbath to end so that I can do this one little thing. It was one little thing, but I just couldn't let it go, right? So I went on to the next Saturday, went into Friday evening before I started my Sabbath. I did the thing where I wrote down what I hadn't finished doing and needed to be done. And then I put the things in a box. And that kind of really helped me to clear my mind and not have to worry about it, where I had it packed in just there. And then the other thing is prepping. For me, I become very big on prepping. I don't cook, and that's why I go to people's houses to eat food from their house.
Clever, good.
Yeah. So, but I found myself spending more time in the kitchen and actually enjoying making Sabbath meals. And meal prep is one of the other things that I would do before Sabbath, so that even if I'm making a meal on the Sabbath, everything is right there. I am staying away from reading magazines and things that will want me to want more things, because on Sabbath, it's supposed to be a space where you are in the present. You are grateful for the things you have, not the things you do not have. So if I go on to read a magazine, I'm going to see this thing that I'm like, ooh, I want that. And therefore, it takes me out of the space of where I'm grateful for what I have. And one of the other things I do on Sabbath is being in touch with my feelings and just bringing them to Jesus, whether it's the good, the bad, the ugly. I will do this thing where I write down what the feeling is and what the week has been. What are some of the feelings that I've felt during the week, and then bring them to God in prayer, because I know He cares about my feelings. And therefore, I'm not coming in a space of, oh, I should just be happy and grateful, but I was angry at this day or at this person or whatever, and then talk through it.
Yeah, I think that's really good, that often we think I can only use Sabbath if I'm in the right frame of mind, or if I can only worship God if I'm happy or whatever.
Yeah.
But actually, God wants to hear of our struggles. And
Yes.
like when someone said to me, if you're angry, use that as a way towards Jesus.
Yeah.
If you're struggling, use that as a way to. And I think it's the same thing, isn't it? Yeah.
That's right.
You talked a little bit about food. We love food. And for us, Sabbath is, like you talk to our kids, like Sabbath feast is the thing they look forward to.
Yes.
What have you found as you've done a meal, like with a friend or whatever? What's that look like? What's that done for you as you've done Sabbathing?
I think it just brings me closer to a space of appreciating the things that I have, and especially Sabbath meals. I haven't been able to do lots of those because I don't have many friends that Sabbath, but even with the ones that do not Sabbath, it's still sitting with them. And I love that they're aware that I'm in a Sabbath space. So even the conversations we're going to have on Sabbath, they're going to be a little different than a regular day. I know that doesn't sound a lot like the Monday Christian we talk about, but they're more aware. And that just gets me in a space where I'm able to like just appreciate that everything that I have and the beautiful community, because Sabbath is big. It's a lot of community things that you get to do. Even when you look at the life of Jesus, he had the disciples, the people who are all followers, but also had the 12 who are the people he did lots of the Sabbath with, and even going to the synagogue, and they were always there with him. And the Sabbath meals were based with the apostles, really, the 12. So having that intimate community where I'm more intentional to reach out to people as compared to meeting everyone on Sunday and having conversations and going my way. So it's more way of connecting to community. Yeah.
For those who are kind of just wrestling with this, struggling with this, not maybe never encountered this before, what one thing would you say to encourage them about Sabbath?
Yeah, I think there's gonna be, once you're intentional and you set aside the time, I don't think there's a certain thing that you must do on Sabbath. I think it looks different for every person, so there's no legalism in it. When we've been talking about it with my community group, it's about finding things that are gonna bring you rest and delight and get you into a space of worship. So if for you it's something like going bowling with your friends, do that. If for you it's taking walks, which is one thing I actually really enjoy, then do that. If for you it's having a Sabbath nice bottle of wine open on Friday and on Saturday there's nothing at the end of it, then that's it for you, you know?
No judgment. Where's Zippy?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what Sabbath should look like. And I don't have it down, actually. I've noticed every single Friday I'll take up a different activity, and at the end of it, if I'm not feeling like I'm in a space where I was more like a stop, rest, delight, worship, then or resistance on the things of the world, then I'm gonna take off that thing off my list. Like if I feel like I spend time having conversation with this person and it didn't leave me in a space of rest, then I take it off the list. I'm like, probably that's not it. So everyone's gonna have their own rhythm in terms of how you Sabbath, and I think that's important, finding what fits for you.
Yeah, and I think just to close it, like it's definitely contested ground.
Yeah.
The devil does not want us to rest, to Sabbath and stuff. So there's going to be a fight for this space. Him, Wendy, thanks. We really appreciate what you have to say. It's brilliant.
Thank you.
Let's put our hands together for Wendy, hey?